There are many secrets living inside the Vatican. What is hiding in the most holy place on earth? What do they not want us to know? Was Pope Francis the last pope? Follow me down the rabbit hole to find out more. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking about the Vatican and the Pope. So thank you, Jocelyn, Stephanie, Holly, Carter, and Carly for requesting this episode. With the Pope dying on Easter Sunday, I decided that we needed to get an episode out as fast as possible. And so this episode is actually going out to everyone at the same time. So my patrons, everyone on Patreon, normally gets the episode a week early and ad-free. This week, they're just getting it ad-free because I'm dropping it the same time that I'm dropping it for everybody else. So last week, you guys got The Simpsons. Next week, for everybody else, like that just listens to it on Spotify or Apple, you guys will get The Simpsons. This week, you all get this episode. It also has been requested quite a bit, but I know that everyone is curious about the conspiracies behind not only the Pope, but also the Vatican and what they're doing there. So I decided that we should put this all together in an episode for you. But please understand that this is a conspiracy theory podcast where we talk about conspiracies. So these conspiracies do not represent my views on the Catholic Church, nor is it me trying to push my views religiously or otherwise onto anybody that's listening. I'm just reporting what I found on the internet. Some of those things are anti-Catholic Church. Most of them are because of the conspiracies, basically. But let's dive in. The Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, the largest of the three major branches of Christianity. They believe that every pope is given special authority by God to guide the church for a time, however long he's alive. The word pope is derived from the Greek word papus, meaning father. The first pope, per se, was Simon Peter, who was one of Jesus' disciples. Jesus entrusted Simon Peter, later St. Peter, to build his church. This is stated in Matthew 16, verses 18 and 19. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. In the later parts of the Roman Empire, they were primarily Christian, although prior to that they were not. This was a long time in the making. Many Roman empires actually persecuted and killed many practicing Christians along the way, which is why the first few successors of St. Peter are kind of hard to trace and remain pretty obscure just because, they were probably in hiding or put to death for their beliefs. As the capital of the Roman Empire, Rome became the growing center of the Catholic Church. It is also believed that Rome was the place where St. Peter was martyred under the reign of Emperor Nero. It wasn't until the rise of Emperor Constantine that the church had their first official pope in the figure of Pope Damasus I. He was appointed the Bishop of Rome from October 366 until he died in 384 AD. Since then, the papacy has continued in some form or another. They have faced a number of different threats over the centuries. At first, they were trying to protect the church against the threat of separation, and then during the Renaissance, it was trying to balance the fragile position of power with the government. The papal primacy asserted by Pope Gregory I during his time as pope between 590 and 640 AD helps to develop what it meant to be the pope. This doctrine is a document outlining the respect and authority due to the pope from other bishops and their area of jurisdiction. Today, the position of the Pope is still one of great prestige and authority. There have been 266 popes in the Catholic Church, starting with St. Peter and ending with Pope Francis. There has not been a new pope named yet, and I'm not sure if there will be, but we will get into the conspiracies and a little bit behind all of that. But first, let's get into the history of the Vatican and Vatican City. By the 4th century, the church had gained control of a great deal of territory called the Patrimony of St. Peter in and around Rome. As the Roman Empire fell apart in the 5th century, papal influence in central Italy began to increase. The people of the area began to rely on the Pope for protection from invading armies. Around the year 600, the church was one of the largest landowners in the world. In the mid-8th century, there was a restructuring of political alliances on the Italian peninsula. This is when the donation of Pippin came about. The donation of Pippin was the promise made by the Carolingian king Pippin III to Pope Stephen II, granting the Pope rights to large territories in central Italy. In the 9th century, the first city walls, the Leonine walls, were completed under Pope Leo IV. These walls were constructed to protect the area around St. Peter's Basilica from Muslim raiders who had previously sacked it. The walls enclosed Vatican Hill for the first time in its history. Between the 12th and 13th centuries, the Vatican underwent a building boom, basically. A new palace was built and the Leonine walls were restored. The Vatican fell into decay after the office of the Papacy was moved to France in 1309, but in 1377 the Pope returned to Rome, and that marked the beginning of the revitalization. In the 19th century, Italy became a unified country, and this led to some major changes in the Vatican's political status. The church lost its land to the new country because they owned so much land, but some of the papal territories actually voted to join the Kingdom of Sardinia in 1859. In 1870, Italy annexed the rest of the papal states and made Rome the Italian capital. To protest the incorporation into a unified Italy, each pope after the unification remained a voluntary prisoner of the Vatican. They wouldn't leave the small territory of the papal grounds. Then Italy thought the popes would eventually give up, and they just tried to wait them out. The popes are very stubborn people. So this situation lasted about 60 years and 5 popes until in 1929 a solution was found. Vatican City's independent sovereignty was recognized by the fascist Italian government in the Lateran Treaty. This treaty was signed by Mussolini for the Italian government and by Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Gasparri for the papacy, and was confirmed by the Italian Constitution in 1948. In this treaty, Italy gave the Vatican apology money, while the Vatican finally acknowledged Italy's existence, which it had been denying up until this point. Also, the Pope promised to remain neutral in politics and in war. They wouldn't take any sides. Most of the people that inhabited the city were priests or nuns, but there are several hundred laypersons engaged in secretarial, domestic trade, and service occupations in the city. The Pope sits upon the Holy See, which is basically like a throne, but the Holy See isn't just a throne. It also refers to all the rules that make the Catholic Church what it is and the government of Vatican City. So technically, the land given to Italy was given to the Holy See. But it's best broken down kind of like this. So the Catholic Church is like a corporation. The Holy See is the name of the corporation. And the Pope is the CEO of the Holy See, which is the corporation. That's really breaking it down and how most people can basically understand it. But also, Vatican City has a king. Vatican City being like the country. The king has unlimited power in the city and makes Vatican City one of the last absolute monarchies in the world. The king's absolute power is why Vatican City can't join the European Union. Only democracies are actually allowed in the European Union. There is a legislative branch of government staffed by cardinals appointed by the Pope, but the king can overrule this branch altogether. The king and the Pope are 2 different roles, but they are occupied by the same person at the same time. So, Pope Francis is also King Francis. But because the Pope is elected and the king has absolute power, that makes Vatican City the world's only elected, non-hereditary, absolute monarchy. But the United Nations has the Holy See as a member, but not Vatican City, which is actually the country. And on the same note, the Holy See gives passports to its citizens, not Vatican City. It's all very, very confusing. I had to watch and read, and I had to really dive in. I didn't understand it, but I think I'm starting to. There are no born citizens of Vatican City. You only become a citizen of the country if the king appoints you as a citizen. You only get appointed by the king if you work for the Pope. So it's like this weird roundabout way that the Pope and the king are the same person. But the Pope works for the corporation and the king works for the country, but the corporation and the country are basically the same too. Very confusing. But that's not why we're here. We're here for the conspiracies. There are so many conspiracies that we need to cover with this one, so just buckle up and hang on for dear life. Firstly, are Catholic immigrants pawns of the Pope? So the Catholic population in the U.S. was very small until the 19th century. Ironically, that's when we saw an influx of Catholic immigrants into the country. It's believed that they were sent here by the Pope to increase the Catholic population in this up-and-coming powerhouse that is the United States. It was a variety of different immigrants. So you had like Irish Catholics, German Catholics, and closer to the late 19th century, we see more like Italian and Polish Catholics. But like, where did this theory come from? Well, in the 1850s, there was a very prominent anti-Catholic party known as the Know Nothing Party. They got their name because the party required its members to say, "I know nothing," when they were asked about specifics about the party by like people that weren't in the party. They're like, "I don't know anything." So they became known as the Know Nothing Party. They believed the Romanists, which is a derogatory term for Roman Catholics, were trying to subvert civil and religious liberty in the U.S. Even then, they saw the religion as like super corrupt. They thought the leaders of the church would try to instill anti-American beliefs in their followers and remake the country in its own image. Like, they couldn't take over Italy, so they were trying to move to the new Roman Empire, which America had been called on occasion, and make the U.S. its new headquarters. The Know-Nothings believed they were trying to take over the country, and they were like, yeah, we're not trying to do all that. So they were very anti-Catholic. They believed that the Catholic bishops were handpicked by the Pope to sow chaos on American soil. In turn, the party started pushing Protestant views. The Know Nothing Party fell apart due to internal struggle and disagreements on slavery in the 1860s. The Catholic Church might have helped create coronavirus. So firstly, in Latin, corona means crown. Corona has 13 different definitions on dictionary.com. If you go to other websites, they only give you like one or two definitions maybe, and one of those definitions is like the virus itself, like COVID-19. So you have to go to dictionary.com to really get like a full breakdown of all the different definitions, because you need the 13th definition and the 11th, I think. One of these definitions is the tonsure of a cleric, which is the way that they cut their hair. Like the top is all bald, but then they have like a ring of like hair around. Another definition is the ecclesiastical definition of a gold-colored stripe around the lower edge of a clerical headdress as of a mitre. A mitre is the headdress worn by the Pope. Coronavirus could mean the Pope's virus. But like, why would the Pope and the Catholic Church want to spread a virus? Like most of the conspiracy theories about the Pope and the higher-ups in the Catholic Church, it's actually believed that they're working for the devil, not God. And this doesn't apply to everyone that's a Catholic. This applies to the higher-ups in the church, and we'll cover that so many times. But coronavirus actually shut down the world. It kept people from church. People were dying from this virus. The likelihood is that not all of them were believers, so a good amount of the souls probably went to hell. The message of Christ was always him being like this master healer, but now people are turning to a vaccine for their health, which we're not getting on vaccines today. But the Pope, as much as the rest of the governments, was pushing for this vaccine, the mRNA vaccine that actually modifies DNA. DNA that has been purpose-built by God for the makeup of each human. Dr. Brian Artist has done research into COVID and has concluded that this virus originates from a snake. There's a lot more to that we'll go into in the COVID episode, but the point of mentioning that is that a snake or like a serpent actually represents evil when you're reading the Bible or you're going through different religious texts. That's weird, right? And the fact that corona means mitre, which is like the gold trim on a headdress, it's just like really weird connections. Let's move on to Pope Benedict XVI's resignation. On February 28, 2013, Pope Benedict XVI resigned from being the Pope. He stated that he was resigning due to deteriorating strength due to old age, basically, and that the physical and mental demands of the papacy was just too much for him now. Only about 6 popes in the history of the church have resigned from their position. Usually, the pope serves until he dies. There are a number of conspiracies that swirl around this resignation. Some people believe he resigned because of the Vatican documents that were leaked, which we will dive so deep into in just a minute. But other people believe that he resigned because of the gay lobby or the gay mafia. This is one of the most popular theories as to why he resigned. So basically, there was said or is said to be 4 or 5 people that make up this gay lobby who sought power over Vatican decisions. During his time as Pope, Benedict denounced gay marriage, calling it a manipulation of nature. The gay lobby had enough power to force Benedict to resign and to put Francis as the Pope. Pope Francis maintained that a marriage should be a union between a man and a woman, but he was welcoming to the LGBTQ plus community. He said that being homosexual was not a crime and called for the criminalization of homosexuality to be recognized as unjust. This made a lot of Catholics and non-Catholics alike upset. Allegedly, the gay lobby was broken up, but if it wasn't broken up, why would Pope Benedict resign? The first pope in 6 centuries to do so. And why would a pro-LGBTQ pope be put into power unless the gay lobby was pushing this power? There's another kind of different theory about this as well. It's more like a blackmail theory, is that the gay lobby or the gay mafia, they're not actually a mafia. They're just a couple bishops that work in Vatican City that have been found to be gay and now are being blackmailed to do certain things in the Vatican. Others believe Pope Benedict XVI resigned due to the case of Richard Williamson. So Richard Williamson was this ultra-traditionalist Catholic bishop. He was among 4 men who were consecrated bishop in 1988 by the late Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. The Archbishop formed this group of men in 1969 in opposition of the Second Vatican Council. Vatican II, or the Second Vatican Council, was a series of 1960s church meetings that modernized the Catholic Church. This is when they started allowing Mass in vernacular rather than Latin and changing the church's relationships with other religions. They also emphasized the importance of active participation in the church's activities by lay people, not just people that are Catholic. However, because the men in the group were made bishops by the Archbishop and not with the Pope's consent, the Vatican excommunicated all of them. In 2009, Pope Benedict removed the excommunication. He wanted to bring the bishops back under the wing of the church because he was worried that they would start a parallel church that was as ultra-conservative or ultra-traditional as these bishops were. And the fear of this wasn't unfounded because they had actually started doing this exact thing after their excommunication. They had 6 seminaries and dozens of chapels, schools, and retreat centers around the globe. Just before the Pope's decree was made public to remove their excommunication, Williamson had done a television interview in Switzerland where the group was based and was running their ministry, saying that he didn't believe Jews were killed in gas chambers during World War II. This was a huge embarrassment, especially because Pope Benedict was born in Germany. Williamson was fined in Germany because Holocaust denial is a crime in Germany, which makes me question some other things, but I'm not going to get into all that right now. But let's get into the Vatican's leaked documents. In 2013, the Pope's butler, Paolo Gabriel, was arrested after he was found with stolen papal documents. He was held in a cell at the Vatican and eventually granted house arrest. The problem was, even though Gabriel's lawyer insisted that he worked alone, the leaks continued after his arrest, meaning that he couldn't have worked alone if he did any of the stealing of these documents at all. Gabriel was literally just a patsy. The leak pointed to at least 3 shadowy plots. First, a campaign to undermine Cardinal Bertone, who was the Vatican Secretary of State and Pope Benedict's top deputy. Second, a struggle over the future of the Vatican Bank. And third, an effort by Italian cardinals to gain more influence over the choices of Benedict's successor. The information was being leaked to the press to discredit people. It was later revealed that disgruntled prelates inside the Vatican bureaucracy who viewed Cardinal Bertone as a threat were the ones leaking the documents. Well, are these leakers like part of the gay lobby? I think that actually makes some sense, but I didn't find any evidence of that. But then also, Cardinal Bertone is like super shady. So these prelates thought the cardinal was going to be an obstacle to church reform. The cardinal had consolidated his power by promoting former associates he knew he could trust to influential posts. So one of them being the governor of the Vatican city-state, another the head of the Vatican treasury, and another as the Holy See's top bank regulator. Bertone, being Pope Benedict's top deputy, probably knew the Pope was thinking of stepping down. By putting his trusted allies in influential positions, it's believed that his goal was to gain control over the next papal conclave through the meeting of the College of Cardinals that selects the Pope. Of course, money is also a huge motivator. So the Catholic priests actually take a vow of poverty, but the Vatican presides over a closely held, probably way more than this, $6 billion empire. But like, take that with a grain of salt, because that came from an article in 2015, and I couldn't find exact numbers that are up to date as to now. You can see like they got $23 million here, they got $6 million there, whatever. I don't know how much money is actually in the Vatican bank, and I'm pretty sure nobody does. Some of the first leaks were confidential letters from an archbishop to Pope Benedict warning of corruption and abuse of the power in Vatican finances, to include millions of dollars in padded contracts. They were, or probably are, laundering money. Bertone actually ordered the archbishop silenced and removed from his post. The day after the butler was arrested, the Vatican Bank's president was fired due to charges of negligence. Mind you, they hired this guy to be the president of the bank in 2009 to clean up after decades of allegations of money laundering and infiltration by the mafia and Italian Freemasons. So they needed to clean up the money laundering, and then it's found that there's still money laundering. So this guy must have just been like better at money laundering, but obviously not good enough because people still found out. So they probably hired somebody that was even better at money laundering. They're for sure laundering money. Especially because like nothing has changed since they fired this president, because European banking officials gave the bank failing marks in 2015 in 7 critical areas to include measures to combat the financing of terrorism. Yep. They could be financing terrorism, which is just like, whatever. And the whole time, the Holy See was more vigorous in investigating where the leaks were coming from than the patterns of corruption and influence peddling that these leaks were alleging. Which tells us that the corruption is true, that they don't want you to know anything about it. But don't worry, they hired a Fox News Rome correspondent as a senior communications advisor to handle damage control. But it goes deeper than that, because Bertone allegedly conspired to force the editor of a Catholic newspaper to resign by falsely accusing him of a homosexual affair. I'm starting to think that Cardinal Bertone was in the gay lobby. He's projecting this homosexual affair because they would never believe he's doing this, like he's gay, if he's being so outspoken about other people being gay. Plus, aren't all these guys supposed to be celibate? Like, they're not supposed to be, like, having sex with anybody. Especially other men. But also, Bertone's influence and power gives the impression that he was really in charge and not Pope Benedict. And he helped to pick Pope Francis. So, I think this guy's definitely in the gay mafia inside the Vatican, which has been broken up now. There's no gay mafia anymore. So let's get into the secret archive. The Vatican Apostolic Archives is the place that holds all acts disseminated by the Holy See. It holds the Holy See's official paperwork and other information important to the Pope, to include like state papers, correspondence, and account books, among so many other things. In the 17th century, the secret archives separated from the Vatican Library. Pope Paul V separated them, so the library holds historical items and priceless art, while the archives hold some of the Catholic Church's most precious treasures and documents. Like, it has letters from Abraham Lincoln and documents from Martin Luther's excommunication. But we don't know everything that's in the archives. I mean, it's said to hold like 17 million pages of information and about 53 miles worth of shelving. So it's got a lot of information in there. And honestly, I don't even think they know how much information is in there. There are reports that the archives contain communications between Roman Emperor Nero and St. Paul regarding the existence of Jesus. This communication is said to be evidence that Jesus Christ did not exist. There are reports that the Vatican is holding proof of the existence of extraterrestrial life, specifically that they have skulls in the archives. And it goes further, that the Pope is actually conspiring with extraterrestrial beings to implant everyone on Earth with computer chips. They have come out and said that meetings with aliens shouldn't be seen as demonic, but instead they deserve to be carefully studied. They went on stating that it's reasonable to believe in alien life, especially since there's so much evidence to support it, and that Jesus is the king over the universe, not just the king of this world. Some believe the archives hold the 3 secrets of Fatima, which is a series of apocalyptic visions and prophecies given to 3 young Portuguese shepherds by a Marian apparition starting in May of 1917. They were entrusted with 3 secrets. The first was a vision of hell and suffering of sinners. The second, a prediction of the end of the Great War and the beginning of another. And the third was a vision of the death of the Pope and other religious figures. The secrets were released from the archives in 2000, but up until that point, it was believed that the third secret involved nuclear holocaust, natural disaster, and such end-of-the-world type things. And this is still actually widely believed because the third secret is so, like, obvious compared to the others. Like, yeah, the Pope's gonna die. Other religious leaders are gonna die. Like, they're not gonna live forever. Like, the first one shows hell, and it shows, like, what happens to sinners. The second one shows, and this is, like, in the middle of World War I, right? So it's showing the end of the Great War, which is World War I, and the start of another war, which we know was World War II. Like, we can fact check that. And then the third secret was just like, oh, yeah, the Pope's gonna die. Well, no shit. We know the Pope's going to die. Like, all the other popes have died. So it's still believed that the third secret has never been fully released to anybody. Other theories point to the archives being the largest collection of pornography in the world, but there's no evidence to support that one way or another. I just thought I would include it for you. But the real question we need to ask is, does the archives house a time machine? This machine is believed to be built by Father Pellegrino Ernetti, an Italian scientist and priest who is well known for performing exorcists. This machine is known as the chronovisor. It's supposed to allow you to view moments in the past, although some sources say that you can also view, like, the future, but most say it's basically like a television to view the past only. In 1972, an Italian newspaper published a photo shown by the machine. This photo was the face of Christ. Father Ernetti worked with a team to create the chronovisor, and it took them 13 years, and most of them actually didn't want to be named in the project. He actually only gave out 2 names other than himself who worked on the project. One of them was Enrico Fermi. He created the first nuclear reactor and worked on the Manhattan Project. And he actually was such a good scientist that he was nicknamed by the others the Pope. Yes, Fermi was Catholic, but it's just also interesting. The other one was Werner von Braun. So he was a German aerospace engineer who worked for the Nazi Party and was brought to America during Operation Paperclip, where he worked at NASA. He is referred to as the father of space travel and the father of rocket science. Though Father Ernetti didn't drop any other names, he did drop some clues to other members of the team that worked on the chronovisor. He said a member of the team was from Japan and had won a Nobel Prize in physics. It's assumed that he was talking about Hideki Yukawa. Other people have been speculated to have worked on this machine, but again, no one else was named. The chronovisor consisted of 3 components. The first, a multitude of antennae, which were able to pick up every conceivable wavelength of light and sound. These antennae were made of alloys consisting of 3 like mysterious metals. The second component was a type of direction finder activated and driven by the wavelengths of light and sound which it received. You could basically give it like a place, a date, and a person, and it would find that. The third component was an extremely complex array of recording devices which made possible the recording of sound and particularly of images from any time and any place. And of course, after they set up the machine, they wanted to ensure that it worked. So they wanted to verify what they were seeing was authentic. So they decided to start off with something like pretty recent that they could verify. So they tuned the machine to one of Mussolini's speeches. And they saw with the chronovisor what they knew to be true of Mussolini's speech. From there, they started to work backward. They observed the speech given by Napoleon in which he proclaimed Italy a republic, and they could check that against the records that they had of that speech. They went back even further into ancient Rome, and there they observed a speech by Cicero, one of the most famous speeches, and the first delivered against Catalina. Father Ernetti said that he noticed slight differences in the Latin pronunciations of Cicero's time as compared to the Latin he was taught in school, but pronunciations change. We also have the text of those speeches, so again, it was possible to check that what they were seeing in the chronovisor was what actually happened in history. After that, again, they just kept going further and further back in time. So they went to 169 BC and watched a play written by the father of Latin poetry. I couldn't say his name. I didn't even try. This play had been basically lost to us. We only had about 25 fragments surviving. But after they saw the play, they came back and reconstructed it. It has now been published in its entirety, although it's not easy for just anybody to find. You have to really look for it. It might be in the archives. But that's what brought them to the newspaper publishing the picture of Christ's face in agony on the cross. But that picture was the only picture the team ever released taken by the chronovisor. A French Jesuit priest put out a book stating that the Vatican ordered Father Ernetti to keep silent about his discovery and suppressed any material evidence of its existence, which is why it's believed that they are actually keeping the chronovisor in the archives. But isn't it interesting that the chronovisor sounds a lot like coronavirus? And I know that because as I'm recording this episode, I'm going to have to edit out however many times I said coronavirus instead of chronovisor. So I'm wondering if they pulled a Disney Frozen here. And you know how in that episode, the thought is that Walt Disney actually froze his head after he died or had his head frozen. So if technology advances, he can be unfrozen. But then they named the movie Frozen. So that way, if you ever Google Disney's Frozen, it comes up with the movie and not with Disney's head. Well, chronovisor is often, as I have said it over and over, coronavirus. So was that named so that way you're not thinking about the chronovisor and this time machine that can take you back to look at different things in the past? But also, what are they trying to hide? What do they not want us to know about the past? There's something weird about this. But anyway, the archives are also housing the reason for the French Revolution. Augustin Barruel, a French journalist, intellectual, and Jesuit priest, published a book in 1797 that alleged that the Illuminati were going to try to take over the world. He was actually one of the original conspiracy theorists that we know of, probably. So he said Freemasons, specifically the Knights Templar, which had not been dissolved even though it was said to have been dissolved, and the Illuminati wanted to demolish all monarchies, including the Vatican, to establish a world republic, or what we like to call the New World Order. Augustine believed radicals like Voltaire, the Freemasons, and the Illuminati stirred up society on purpose. The French Revolution truly did change society, and that's when Augustine was see, I told you, the Illuminati were just these puppet masters, and they were just trying to create this whole chaos. In 1806, Augustine received a letter from a man named Jean-Baptiste Simonini, stating that the Jewish people were also in on this conspiracy. This letter, known as the Simonini letter, has continued to fuel anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and is one of the reasons why the Illuminati and Jewish rulers are typically referenced together when it comes to conspiracies. The letter is said to be stored in the archives. If it is there, it's the only proof that they started the French Revolution on purpose. Well, let's talk about how the Vatican was involved in World War II. After the victory of the Allied forces in Germany, the Nazis were forced to seek refuge outside Europe. Many of them fled to Argentina, Chile, and Brazil. A research fellow at Harvard University, Gerald Steinacher, was given access to thousands of internal documents in the archives of the International Committee of the Red Cross. In those documents, he found that the Red Cross actually helped Nazis escape Germany. The Red Cross was helping refugees and collaborators escape, and they say that Nazis used them knowing that they were overwhelmed and didn't have enough time to truly check out everybody, and that they didn't really know that they were Nazis. They were using these fake identities. Steinacher believes the Vatican actually helped in these efforts. The Vatican's help was based on the hope for revival of European Christianity and dread of the Soviet Union, even though they were supposed to stay neutral in all conflicts. Through the Vatican Refugee Commission, war criminals were knowingly provided with false identities. The Red Cross relied substantially on Vatican references because of how overwhelmed they were with refugees. They were like, well, the Vatican wouldn't lie to us. Little did they know. Although correspondence shows that the Red Cross knew some Nazis were getting through, they maintained that they didn't know just how many were actually getting through. 90% of ex-Nazis fled via Italy, mostly to Spain and North and South America. But of course, this all came after the Vatican profited off of the Holocaust. The Institute for the Works and Religion, IOR, was founded on June 27, 1942 by Pope Pius XII. It absorbed the administration of the works of religion, which had originated as the Commission for Works of Charity. The IOR, or Vatican's bank, is somewhere between an offshore bank and the Federal Reserve. It's a great place to launder money because of the lack of regulation placed on the bank. It's only subject to the laws of Vatican City, which is an independent state and can be changed at any point. So the bank was actually established to hide its investment in German business from the Allies during the war. And the Vatican was deeply embedded with German companies in World War II. They invested in the insurance companies for life insurances of the Jews that went to death camps, and then the Vatican would take the cash value of the insurance policy, and when the family members of those that were killed tried to collect the life insurance policy on their loved one, they would be met with, show us the death certificate, which obviously they didn't have because their loved one died in a concentration camp or was gassed to death and there was no record of it. So they wouldn't get a payout. And then the Vatican actually got to keep all the money because they were just investors and they weren't the direct insurer. So they didn't have to return any of the money made off these people's deaths. Let me rephrase this. The Vatican profited off of the Jewish deaths in concentration camps. Yes, you're hearing me correctly. And they could do this because they had insight into what was going to happen. The Vatican's financial advisor at the time was believed to be a Nazi spy. So he went back and forth and he was like, yeah, they're about to go ahead and kill a bunch of Jews, so we should go ahead and invest in life insurance policies. Outside of that, they also received a church tax from Hitler every single year. This was paid to the church as a fee for holding the Nazi money for them because as an offshore account, Germany was basically, or Hitler was using them so that way their money wasn't tracked by the Allied forces. They also were involved in smuggling or in helping smuggle Nazi looted valuables. So who knows how much art and gold that they have that formerly belonged to Jewish families. But the Vatican reported to the United States that they could not confirm news of Nazi crimes, even though they knew exactly what was happening the whole time. And the Vatican just chalked it up to them doing their job. The only job of the Vatican is to protect the church's interest. So they were like, yeah, our interest is to expand the church and make sure that we still have a church in Europe when this is all said and done. So we're going with the winning side, which we all know Germany lost. But they profited off of it for sure. Is the devil living at the Vatican? The Vatican's chief exorcist came forward saying the devil was at the Vatican. So Gabriel Amorth performed around 60,000 exorcisms during his career. So he was appointed as assistant exorcist in Rome in 1986 and became chief exorcist in 1992. He stayed in that position until his death in 2016. And he said it's not a surprise to him that the devil's there because he had to perform an exorcism on another exorcist in the Vatican. But to really understand what's going on, we kind of need to know what's underneath the Vatican. The lower level has a series of rooms marked by letters. So on a virtual tour, it explains the different rooms and what you might find in each of these rooms. So you first go down, you have like A, B, C, whatever, right? So in room C, it's a mausoleum to Lucius Tullius Cethus. And it's explained that the room was used to pour offerings to the dead during the funeral rites carried out in the burial chamber. And then you go to room E, and it has a picture of a vase. And this vase has a picture of Medusa at the base of like the pour handle. And this leads to questions about idols to gods that aren't the God that they're saying they worship and believe in. And over again in the Bible, it says to turn away from false gods, but like this holiest place on earth have items that depict false gods. And some people are like, oh, it's history. We'll get into that because I don't believe that they would just keep this history around when you're not supposed to have idols to false gods. Room H, which is the largest and most luxurious of the mausoleums, has head statues from the Roman Empire. And again, idols to a god that isn't their god. In room I, there are chariots of Mercury and Pluto. The theme is an explicit reference to the overcoming of death and return from the afterlife. So Mercury is seen with wings at his ankles, walking in front of the chariot carrying Pluto and his wife. And that doesn't sound like Catholicism to me. And this is actually told to Ezekiel in chapter 8 by God. So Ezekiel chapter 8 verses 5 through 10 say this. Then he said to me, Son of man, look toward the north. So I looked, and in the entrance north of the gate of the altar, I saw this idol of jealousy. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing? The utterly detestable things the Israelites are doing here, things that will drive me far from my sanctuary, but you will see things that are even more detestable. Then he brought me to the entrance of the court. I looked and I saw a hole in the wall. He said to me, Son of man, now dig into the wall. So I dug into the wall and saw a doorway there. And he said to me, Go in and see the wicked and detestable things they are doing here. So I went in and looked, and I saw portrayed all over the walls all kinds of crawling things and unclean animals and all the idols of Israel. Ezekiel was literally led to a secret door that he had to dig to, and inside they were worshiping different idols that they were been told over and over again not to worship. And it gets worse because in room U, they have a depiction of Lucifer. Or the description says, depiction of Lucifer, that is light bearer, the morning star. On the opposite wall, there's a drawing of Vesper, the evening star, cosmic symbols of the human life cycle. But the question is like, why would you keep the depiction of Lucifer? Yes, it's important to learn about him so we don't fall for his tricks, but I have never seen a church put up a picture of the devil, ever. And they could get rid of it. Like, that's the thing that gets me, that they could get rid of all these false idols, the depiction of Lucifer, but they keep them under the church. Why? Like, a lot of people come to the Vatican's defense. They're like, well, it's history. Yes, but history belongs in museums. Now, I'm not saying it can't be in churches, but the Bible specifically states not to worship false idols. Is preserving history in the church really more important than listening to your God? Like, I don't know of any other situation like this. Like, at what point did you think it was okay to have false idols in your church? If you're reading the same book, you should not be worshiping false idols. But this actually brings us to the holy doors. So recently, on December 24th, 2024, Pope Francis opened the holy doors for the holy year of 2025, or the Jubilee of Hope is what he called it, but in the Bible it's referenced as like a jubilee. The holy doors are open on Jubilee years and have been for centuries now. But this time it was different. So he opened 5 different doors over a series of like a couple weeks, and they called this like a doorway to salvation. But if we bring it back to Christianity, which is what the Catholic Church is all about, the Bible says that Jesus is the only way to salvation. Opening these doors technically aren't biblical. I mean, maybe symbolic, but kind of like strange, I guess. But he opened St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican on December 24th. On December 26th, he opened a holy door at Rome's Rebibbia prison, marking the first time a pope opens a holy door at a penal institution. On December 29th, he opened the holy door at Basilica of St. John. On January 1st, he opened the holy door at Basilica of St. Mary Major, and January 5th, he opened the holy door at Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls. So why open these doors or portals? Like, was he opening a portal to the underworld? Like, maybe it was an attempt to pervert the holy and open a gateway to spiritual darkness. Because 50% of all Christians are Catholic. That's a lot of people following the Pope and believing in what he is doing and teaching. And I've done a lot of research into cults, and I'm starting to wonder if the Catholic Church is a cult. Like, one of the tall tale signs that you're in a cult is that the leader is not following scripture, but making things up to match what they're trying to push. Not only that, but the doors are to remain open throughout the year, and pilgrims from all over the world will be making their way to Rome to pass through these doors as like this door to salvation. But especially with the death of Pope Francis, many people travel to Rome and Vatican City to honor him, probably more people than would have traveled just to go to the doors alone. So then you have to ask yourself, did Satan kill the Pope to get even more people to pass through these holy doors so he could steal their souls? Like, in the Bible, it talks about passages, both good and evil. The Vatican has been evil for a long time. So did they open evil passages? And Father Gabriel Amorth and Father Malachi Martin both stated that there were satanic sects within the Vatican. Remember that Father Gabriel Amorth was the chief exorcist for a while, but Father Malachi Martin was an exorcist. He was just an exorcist in America. And he actually died from hemorrhages after being knocked down by a demon. Those are his words, not mine. So he says that he was knocked down in the evening, but he had given a mass that morning and said that it was like Christ that had spoken through him, that he wasn't actually speaking. Like, he felt like Christ had actually spoke through him. Then later would die from what this demon did to him. But Father Malachi was very outspoken about his belief that there is or was evil in the Vatican. He also apparently knew the third secret of Fatima, which is in the secret archives, but he never talked about what the secret was. He just said, like, imagine the worst possible thing. It's worse than that. Father Malachi performed exorcisms along the East Coast, and he believed that the devil was alive and well and working in people all the time, which you have to believe, because how many people have been exorcised, right? If Father Gabriel Amorth by himself did 60,000 exorcisms, like, how many other priests are also exorcists? They're out there doing exorcisms. Like, you can't tell me that the devil's not alive and well and working within people. But Father Martin believed that it didn't infiltrate the entire church, but parts of the Vatican for sure. They even have statues and symbolism that depict this evil in the Vatican. So the Resurrection is this statue that sits in the main church in Vatican City, and it like sits behind the Pope. It's supposed to represent the resurrection of Jesus, but instead it really looks like a demon is holding on to Jesus's feet. And some have even claimed it resembles Baphomet when you mirror like the right to left side. And so like both sides look the same. Like if you put a mirror down the center of Jesus, and so you can see like the same side mirrored, it looks like it's just super, super eerie. I'll insert a picture on here, but if you're not watching this, go look up a picture right now. It's really creepy. And in Paul VI audience hall, using a bubble lens to capture most of the left and right walls and the stage, it really looks like it's a serpent's face. So the windows on the walls look like slitted eyes, and the pillars on the stage actually look like fangs of a snake. Then the walls look like the underbelly of a snake, and the ceiling looks like reptilian type skin. It's very creepy. Again, I'll insert a picture, but you have to look that up. But on that same note, did you know that the Vatican has an observatory in Arizona? Inside the observatory is obviously a giant telescope. They have a couple of them. And this one specifically is called the Large Binocular Telescope, or LBT. And it has this instrument that has a super long name. The name is called the Large Binocular Telescope Near Infrared Spectroscopic Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research. Woof, it's a long name. So what they did was, instead of saying this really long name every single time, they turned it into an acronym. And they called this device that goes on the LBT Lucifer. L from large, U from utility, C from camera, I from integral, F from field, E from extragalactic, and R from research. Like, why they thought that was appropriate is beyond me. So Lucifer was an instrument for the LBT, like I said, but critics jumped on them quickly, and then they changed the name to LUCI, or Lucy. We can't talk about the Catholic Church without talking about the sexual abuse cases. In the 1980s, accusations of abuse and cover-ups began to receive public attention. Although, if it started coming out in the 80s, you know it had been happening for decades prior to that, especially because many of the cases allege decades of abuse. These allegations were being made by adults or older youths who were reporting years after the abuse had occurred. The abuse was mostly against boys, but girls were involved as well. And it was a variety of members of the church being accused. So priests, nuns, cardinals, bishops, etc. It wasn't just like one place, it was kind of all over the place. So finally, in the 1990s, the cases began to receive significant media and public attention in many countries: Canada, the US, Chile, Australia, Ireland, and much of Europe and South America. Pope John Paul II was criticized for not responding quickly enough to the sexual abuse allegations. Like, he wasn't taking people out of their roles. He wasn't really doing anything. He was just like sitting there letting all these cases roll in. I'm sure they were probably like thinking about how they could discredit the victims, but then it ended up being too many victims. And more allegations just kept coming forward. Abuse was being exposed throughout the US, Europe, Australia, and Chile. And these reports reconfirmed that what everyone was expecting, that there had been a pattern of abuse and cover-ups from the church. The church didn't care about these kids. They just wanted to cover it all up. The church said, actually, that the media attention was excessive and disproportionate to how many cases there actually were. Yet the Holy See examined about 3,000 sexual abuse cases between 2001 and 2010. Pope John Paul II called the sexual abuse within the church, quote, a profound contradiction of the teaching and witness of Jesus Christ, end quote. Pope Benedict XVI apologized for what had occurred, and he met with victims and spoke about his shame at the evil of abuse, calling for the perpetrators to be brought to justice. And then, when Pope Francis took over, he promoted one of the bishops accused in a sexual abuse case and accused the victim of lying. He later apologized for his tragic error, but he was the only one speaking what the rest of them were thinking. Like, if we can discredit the victims, no one will know that we are abusing children. And we got into the Pope's involvement in the Red Shoe Club a couple weeks ago. It makes me wonder, like, how much are they using the children of the church for their evil bidding? But speaking of Pope Francis, was he the last pope? Is Judgment Day coming? The prophecy of St. Malachi may have been fulfilled with the death of Pope Francis. So about 900 years ago, St. Malachi was walking down the street when he got struck with a vision. This vision was basically the future of the Catholic Church. Then he came out of this vision and he wrote down everything that he had seen in 112 short, cryptic Latin phrases. So he predicted the Catholic popes, starting with Celestine II and ending with a pope identified as Peter the Roman, who will lead the church through many tribulations before the end of the world. So each phrase gave a symbol and a warning to each future pope, 112 future popes. So after the 112th pope, there were to be no more popes, only judgment. And Pope Francis was the 112th pope, counted from Celestine II. The first 111 phrases were kind of like short and they were symbolic, and they were even kind of poetic. Each 111 phrases described each pontiff with terrifying accuracy, like their coat of arms, their origin, their personality, and their fate. Which makes me wonder, like, how many of the popes looked at the warning given to them by St. Malachi? But the 112th phrase kind of had this change of tone. So this phrase was longer, all the rest were pretty short, and it was frightening. It declared, quote, "In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, Peter the Roman will sit shepherding his flock through numerous tribulations, and when these things have come to pass, the city on the 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people." The end. From this prophecy, we gained some knowledge. So this last pope would be the 112th, and he would be named Peter, he would be from Rome, and his time would be marked by struggles and tribulations. But the problem is that his name wasn't Peter, it was Francis, and he wasn't from Rome, he was from Argentina, although his parents were Italian immigrants to Argentina. And we know his given name wasn't Francis, but it wasn't Peter either. It was Jorge Mario Bergoglio. When he was chosen as pope, he needed to adopt a saint's name, as every pope does. So he immediately chose Francis, after Francis of Assisi. Saint Francis was the saint of the poor and marginalized. He also founded the religious order of the Franciscans. Well, St. Francis's real name was Giovanni di Pietro di Bernardone, meaning Giovanni, son of Peter. Thus, Pope Francis covered all that was prophesied. Some will debunk this, saying it's quite a stretch, but prophecies are rarely straightforward. Show me any prophecy that's like on the money. Pope Francis' pontification was lined with tribulations. He was the first pope that was a Jesuit, and Jesuits are known for their intellectual vigor, social activism, and rebellious nature. Jesuits are also bound by oath to not seek higher offices in the Roman Catholic Church, but are to do what God calls them to do. And he took over after the resignation of a pope, which only happened a few times. And while the church was still under fire with all the sexual abuse allegations, not to mention the conspiracies that swirled after Pope Benedict XVI had resigned. And not only that, but he accepted the LGBTQ community, which struck a nerve with more conservative Catholics. The Catholic Church is known to be pretty conservative, but he was viewed as a progressive. And of course, he was dealing with all the world issues as well. But for me, it's hard to say that he had the most tribulations of any pope, because there's a lot of history with a lot of pretty rough things. But he did have his fair share of things. I just don't think it was the most tribulations, But it didn't say the most tribulations. It just said that he will encounter tribulations. But it was a time when faith was or is at an all-time low. And it didn't help that COVID happened right in the middle of this and shut down churches. There are a few different theories I've covered about these things. Pope Francis may have been worshiping the devil and not God and wanted to turn people away from God. So maybe that was the point. Maybe that's part of the tribulations talked about in the prophecy. But he was really weird. He was a weird pope. I don't want to say weird, but he did things not normal. So he didn't wear the red cape, and he didn't live in the palace. He didn't wear the red shoes. He didn't speak in Latin. So maybe he was the devil. Either way, now that his papacy is over, the prophecy says the city on the 7 hills will be destroyed and the dreadful judge will judge his people. Well, the city on the 7 hills refers to Rome. And it is also referenced in Revelation 17, verses 9 and 10. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the women sits. They are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. The prophecy didn't say what would be destroyed, like if it was like the buildings would all fall down and the people would die, or if it was like the destruction of spirituality. But either way, we know that Judgment Day is coming. And it doesn't help that on the wall in the Vatican, where they put pictures of the popes, Pope Francis took up the last spot. But anyway, guys, so there are so many conspiracies that I didn't even touch yet. And I didn't really want to do a part 2. Typically, like, 2-parters don't go over well, but there's just no way that I can't do a part 2. There's just so many theories that, like, I didn't touch, and I'm however long, over an hour into this episode. So, next week, everybody will get the Simpsons episode, and my patrons will get the Vatican Part 2 episode. The following week, Vatican Part 2 will come out for everybody else. But if there's something that you wanted me to cover that you didn't hear me cover, that's probably because I didn't cover everything, but you can send that to me in a message or over my email. My email is rabbitholeconspiracypodcast@gmail.com. So if you want to make sure like I hit something, you can send that to me. Or if you have some information that you want me to like clarify or to cover, send that all over to me. I'm going to be doing a Vatican Part 2 episode. There's just no way I can't. Like I have to. So until next week, my friends, stay skeptical, because nothing is real. And I'll see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.